Hi friends! Hi friends! My name is Ella and welcome back to my channel. I'm a writer in progress, and today on my channel we're going to talk a little bit more in-depth and personal about mental health struggles and how writers deal with anxiety. Let's get started. Everybody deals with anxiety. It's part of our daily lives. And little small everyday anxieties aren't big deals, but they can serve as distractions for our writing. Things like car trouble, that weird noise your car makes every day you drive it, or an impending visit from family members, maybe your mom's coming to town, or your sister. If you're a writer who has a day job and you have deadlines coming up, or you have a big project that you have to do, or a presentation, all these things are little anxieties that act as distractions and make it difficult for us to focus on our writing. But oftentimes, because us writers are so in our heads all the times, a lot of our anxieties are about writerly things, like your agent hasn't called you back, or your past deadline, or you haven't finished your revisions for the day, or maybe you've been struck with the dreaded writer's block and you don't know what to write, or you've hit a plot hole, or you realized a character that you have to write out of the book and they're one of your favorite characters and you don't want to do it, and you get so much anxiety over having to make changes to your book that you love. All of these things make it really difficult and hard for us to progress forward in our writing because we get so wrapped up in these worries and these anxieties, and oftentimes because writers are naturally very emotional and very creative people, and these worries, this writer's block, this my agent hasn't called me back, these can lead to self-deprecating thoughts. Things like, everything I write is boring, or everything I write is bad and I'll never get published, or my agent's not going to like this book and she's going to tell me that it's not going to get published or it won't sell. Maybe that voice in our head is going to tell us that everything we write is overdone and tropey and unoriginal, and why bother writing it in the first place? When we get stuck in this cycle of negative self-talk, it reinforces this idea that our writing is not good enough. And it creates this kind of anxiety over writing anything at all, because every time we put pen to page or put our fingers on the keyboard, these thoughts come back and they say, you know, your writing is boring, your writing is bad, it's never going to amount to anything, so why even bother? And then we get this crippling kind of anxiety that's telling us, well, you can't write anything now. And then not being able to write at all for days on end or weeks on end just reinforces the idea that you can't write. And you think your anxiety is telling you the truth. You think all those worries and fears you had are real. And you get stuck in this catch-22 of endless anxiety and miserable existence of never writing, ever. Now, I want to talk a little bit briefly about anxiety in general and my own struggles with anxiety, because a lot of the times, writers who feel anxiety over their craft and over their talent experience anxiety in other realms in their life as well. Anxiety is a mental health condition, and it's a very serious condition that a lot of people take a little too lightly, and I really want to talk about how my experience with anxiety has happened. I myself have dealt with anxiety my entire life. My anxiety manifested itself in ways that were so different that it was hard to keep up with it a lot of the time. I lived in this state of fear for so many years that eventually I almost started to think that it was normal to be afraid constantly, to worry about everything. It seemed like it was my normal. I would have these panic attacks at nighttime, and I would lie in my bed and shake uncontrollably, and I would think that I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. It would feel like my chest was this cement wall and I couldn't expand my lungs far enough to get air. And there would be this voice in my head telling me, you're going to die, you're going to suffocate. And I believed it. And I thought that was normal for a long time because it happened every night. And I didn't tell anyone it happened because I was afraid of what it meant, and it made me feel really vulnerable talking about it. It still makes me feel really vulnerable talking about it. I felt weak for being so afraid to do things that most people wouldn't even think of. I was afraid to sleep because I knew I would have a panic attack when I laid down, because that was my schedule panic attack every day. One of the big things for me when I first started getting panic attacks was this fear of being sick. I've always been a hypochondriac. Every time I have even the tiniest symptom of something, I fear that I'm dying of some disease or that I'm sick in some way. But my anxiety really manifested in this fear of food and being made ill by food. And I was so terrified of eating for a while. There was this period when I was a teenager where I would go weeks just paralyzed to eat because I was so convinced that my food was tainted, that it wasn't prepared properly, or it had been around for too long and it was going to make me sick, and if I ate it I would vomit, and I was terrified of vomiting. Even just the idea of it would, make me shake and sweat, and my heart would speed up so fast and I wouldn't be able to catch my breath, and I would cry. So I stopped eating, and I would make meals, and then I would store them in my room somewhere and hide them, pretend I ate, so that no one would find out. And then I would dispose of them later on. And I would go all day not eating, especially if I had to go anywhere. I was in school at the time, and I was commuting about an hour on the train to school, there and back. And I was so afraid of vomiting on the train, because being sick was bad enough, but being sick in public with people being able to see me was 10 times worse. And I would have panic attacks in the train station before I'd get on the train, convinced that I was going to puke on the train, so I wouldn't eat. And then at school, I wouldn't eat, because I'd be convinced that the lunch that I brought wasn't prepared properly. It was warm, and therefore it was going to make me sick. And I wouldn't eat at school, and then I'd get home and I wouldn't eat dinner. And then before bed, I would be starving, and I would binge. I would eat cereal and ice cream, bagels, and all of this crap food. And then I would lay down, and I would have a panic attack, and I would fall apart, so convinced that I would wake up in the middle of the night sick to my stomach, and I would vomit. And I would cry, and it was horrible. I convinced myself that I couldn't eat food because my anxiety told me it was made to make me sick. And then slowly my anxiety would change. It would latch on to something else, and over time my main fear became something to do with death. I became obsessed with death. I would sit in the train station before school, and I would imagine the train would crash and I would die. And then every time I got into a car, I would imagine the car crashing, or some idiot on the road driving into my car, and I would die. I remember lying awake every time there was a thunderstorm. I wouldn't let myself sleep. It didn't matter how exhausted I was. It didn't matter if it was 4 in the morning and I had school the next day. I could not sleep if there was a thunderstorm, because my mind kept telling me that lightning was going to hit the tree outside of my window and it would fall on my house and kill me. And at least if I was awake, I would know it was coming. Every night I would hear noises. I live in a pretty older house, so it makes noises, it shifts a lot. And every noise was a burglar or a serial killer breaking into my house to kill me or to kill my family. I was so preoccupied with this fear. I assumed everyone was out to get me. I was almost paranoid for a while. I still am. I don't trust people very easily because I feel like I expect bad things from people. My anxiety doesn't let me trust people. Eventually, my anxiety got so overwhelming and my panic attacks were daily at this point, sometimes more than one a day. And it got to the point where my panic, that feeling of dread and worry and fear of dying, was so familiar to me that it was those other times when I didn't feel it. Those times where I felt happy and free and light. They were strange, you know. Those were the times I didn't recognize myself because I defined myself by my anxiety. You know, it was so ingrained into me at that time. It was stressful and painful and exhausting. I was so tired all of the time because I was putting so much energy into worrying. I would overanalyze every situation, every action, every event that occurred, always thinking the worst possible outcome would happen. And I would catastrophize things. I could do something minor, you know. I could leave my house for school a few minutes late, and the entire way to the train I would be catastrophizing this event. I left the house late, I'm gonna miss my train. I'm gonna have to take a later train and I'm gonna miss school. And the school's gonna find out that I wasn't there and they're gonna kick me out and I'm not gonna graduate. And then I'm not gonna get a degree and I won't get a job and I'll become poor and I'll die alone. And that sounds ridiculous to me now. But at the time, I believed that was true. And that was horrible. It was an awful feeling to always expect the worst possible outcome, to always catastrophize things. So eventually it became too much, and I finally decided I couldn't live like this anymore, and it wasn't normal, and I needed help. So I told my family about my anxiety, and my worries, and my panic attacks. And I told my doctor. I got a therapist that I was seeing twice a month, and I started doing cognitive behavioral therapy with her. And I got answers about the underlying cause of my anxiety, which, it's weird, but it's kind of like understanding where my anxiety comes from gave me answers and a clear understanding of who I am as a person and why my mind works this way. And now when I feel the beginnings of anxiety start to rev up inside my body and my mind, I have all the tools that I've been taught on how to stop it, you know? I can distract myself. I can do something creative. I can challenge the assumptions that my brain is making. You know, as much as I know that my anxiety isn't logical, as much as I know where it comes from, my brain still tries to catastrophize everything. Every little detail is a catastrophe. But now I know that I can gently challenge that voice. If I'm late leaving my house and my brain tells me, well, you just ruined your entire future because you left a few minutes late, I can come back at that voice and I can say, maybe I'm a few minutes late to work, but it's not the end of the world, because I can just tell my boss that, I was running a little late this morning, but I'm here now, and I only missed a few minutes. And I can rationalize these things, that they're not catastrophes anymore. I can tell my brain that they're just small little things that I can deal with and I can move on from, and they're not the end of the world. I'm able now to tell myself that the worst possible outcome is never the most likely outcome. The most likely outcome in any situation is neutral. It's usually not great, and it's usually not horrible. It's in the middle, it's neutral. And I can live with that. I want to live with that. That sounds awesome from someone who always expected the worst. So I guess what I'm saying is, I will always be anxious. I will always worry about things. I will always try and catastrophize things. That's how my brain works. But anxiety doesn't control my life anymore. I'm stronger than my anxiety. We're all stronger than our anxiety. And we will fight through it. And to bring this back around to writing, learn how to take control of our writing. Learn how to channel our anxiety into our writing. That's what I do now, and it has helped so much. I still get writerly anxiety when I feel like my writing isn't good enough, when I second guess myself, when I catastrophize every sentence I write. But now I can tell myself, it's not the end of the world. Give myself permission to write even if I think it's bad. And I want to teach you guys kind of the same thing, of how you can learn to work with your anxiety and make it work for you. So there are 2 steps, and the first one is validating. This one's kind of hard, but I want you to validate your feelings. Allow yourself to go to the root of that anxiety. Is it fear? Is it self-doubt? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Whatever it is, I want you to go to the root of it and really allow yourself to accept and validate that feeling. Because that feeling is coming from somewhere deep inside of you, and pushing it away or ignoring it isn't going to make it go away. It's only going to make it fester and become worse. Now, a lot of people misunderstand what this process means. Validating your emotions and your feelings just makes you accept them as real. You are experiencing these feelings. They are real to you. It doesn't mean that you necessarily believe in them or that you are justifying them. It just means you're accepting them as something you do feel, as something you do experience. You should never judge yourself for having these anxieties. You should never fight the onset of any anxiety related to your writing. Because by pushing them away or rejecting them, you're only going to cause yourself more emotional upset later. Only by accepting your feelings of hurt, sadness, anger, fear, self-doubt, are you going to be able to get past these feelings and build resilience towards them in the future. Okay. So after you validated your feelings and really experienced the emotion behind them and understood where it's coming from, your second task is to challenge them. I want you to talk back to that negative voice in your head telling you that your work is boring or unoriginal or bad, and gently challenge the preconceptions it's making. Let's say your brain is telling you your story is boring and no one's going to want to read it. I want you to challenge that sentence. Tell yourself, maybe the reason that I feel like this story is boring is because I'm the one writing it, and I already know what's going to happen, so it's not as exciting to me. But for a new reader who's been left in the dark about all of the exciting plot twists that are coming forward, they're going to experience it for the first time, and it won't be boring. Don't let your anxiety catastrophize things. Say you didn't meet your word count goal for the day. It's not the end of the world. You know what? I tell myself in the days when maybe I don't write as much as I wanted to, I tell myself now that I did as best as I could, and I tried to write even though maybe it was hard and I struggled, and that tomorrow's a new day and I'll feel more creative and more inspired to write tomorrow, and I can catch up, and it's not the end of the world. Accepting that you have these anxieties about writing and that you have to validate and challenge these thoughts before you can progress, it doesn't mean that you're a weak writer or that you'll never achieve your dreams. All writers experience anxiety, even published authors. All writers have distrust and fears and inner demons about their writing, even published authors. Writing is all about emotional highs and lows. It's about the triumph of finishing your manuscript versus the despair of getting a rejection letter when you've queried it. It's the mix of optimism and delight of starting a new work in progress, and defeat when you have to stop writing a book that you cared about that wasn't working. Now, one way that you can kind of channel these writerly anxieties to work for your benefit is through journaling and something that I call free writing. This is very similar to a method of brainstorming that I use as well when I'm coming up with ideas for a novel, where you just write down every thought, every feeling, every tiny little detail you can come up with into a document without editing. You know, don't sugarcoat it, don't mince your words, write whatever you're feeling down in a document, and just let it stand as proof to what you're going through. I want you to let this document stand for what it is. Let it be dark and ugly. Let it be chaotic and messy. Let it be self-deprecating and bitter. Just write down all of your feelings, the sadness, the guilt, the bitterness, the ugliness, the pain, the anger. Validate these thoughts and feelings. Accept them as something that you feel and that you struggle with. Give them the weight that they truly carry in your mind and don't sugarcoat it. Now take these feelings and this torrent of emotion and channel it into your writing. You can use these emotions, the backbone to your story and your characters, and let them root through all of these problems on their own. Write terse arguments between your characters. Write betrayal at the hands of a best friend. Write about a loved one dying. Let your characters grieve. Let them rant. Let them have passionate, rambling monologues about things that make them itch with anger. Let your characters be passionate about something that scares you, and use that as a way to explore it and conquer it. Now, it doesn't matter if you keep these scenes. This is just kind of an exercise, a little journaling. You can keep the scenes in the novel if they work, if they give you great ideas. You can delete them, or you can save them for another project later. It doesn't matter. It's the act of writing that is your catharsis. That's your healing. Now, I want you guys to remember that turning inward and looking at your own anxiety is really courageous. It is so brave to delve into your own pain and sadness and fears and anxieties, to carry the weight of that burden with you every day of your life, to battle past it and through it for the sake of your writing, your passion. By not denying or pushing away or rejecting your anxiety, by not letting it control you anymore, you are showing your brain that you are resilient, that you are stronger than your anxiety, that you will overcome it and you will write. And I want you guys to know that reward does lay on the other side of this battle. Not only does it lay in a book that is intuitive and deeply emotional, with characters and worlds that feel so real they leap off of the page. But you'll also be gaining a deeper self-understanding and self-acceptance through this journey. Have faith in yourself and follow your passion no matter the weight of the obstacles in your way. Okay guys, so that's all I have for you today. I know today's video is kind of rambling and long and really personal at times, but I really hope you enjoyed it and that you got to know me a little bit better and that maybe it helped you in your struggles with writing and anxiety and mental health. Okay guys, I'll see you in my next video. I'm going to be doing a similar one on depression and writing, so hopefully you'll look forward to that one and subscribe to my channel if you're new. Bye guys.